Before Miranda Paul was an agent, she was a member of 12 by 12, and she posted an opportunity with a company called Teacher Created Materials, which you don't actually have to be a teacher to write for them. So I sent them an introductory email with a sample, and then they assigned me a project. And then a year later, I did another project for them. And then a little bit after that, I found another submission opportunity, I think through a different Facebook group. So that is mainly emailing samples, and they match you with a project. But what I've really enjoyed in that space is I've kind of carved out a niche writing historical fiction work for hire projects. And I was such a fan of the American Girl books when I was younger. So I really love doing those historical fiction projects.
This is You May Contribute a Verse. I'm Brenna Jeanneret, Kidlit author of The Law of Birthdays, illustrated by Marina Condra, coming May 1st from Cardinal Rule Press. I'm joined by my co-host, Josh Monken, Kidlit author, dad, and science communicator, and podcast wizard Jon Seymour, author-illustrator of the newly released A Morning with Blueberry. That was our guest, Susan Johnston Taylor, author of Animals in Surprising Shades, illustrated by Annie Bask, chatting about just a few of the many opportunities she's jumped on as a very prolific and accomplished Kidlit writer. We go on to talk about work for hire, school visits, submission strategy, and Susan even reads a bit for the Dead Manuscript Society. Tune in for Susan's verse. So Josh, I was just telling Susan that we are moving because she asked where I was from. And so she was just saying she's from Austin. So I love Austin. How long have you lived there?
7 years.
Oh, wow. So where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Boston.
Oh, okay. What brought you to Austin?
My husband's job. He got, before Whole Foods was acquired by Amazon, he was working for Whole Foods corporate.
Oh, okay.
And he's had a couple different jobs since then, but that's originally what brought us to Austin.
Can I
cool.
make an obvious joke though? Because I feel like I picked up on the audio funniness of this. You went to Austin from Boston so that you could get away from the bees.
Well, actually, so in between, we lived in Canada, actually, in between for my husband's job.
Phonetically less relevant, though.
Right.
Yeah, phonetically less relevant.
No,
yes.
There's no joke there. Canada has to stay out of it. Get out of here, Canada.
There's plenty of Canada jokes. Shout out to John, our Canadian
Yeah, right.
editor.
Shout out to our wizard, our podcast wizard.
I'm trying my best to get my non sequiturs out of the way early in the conversation.
It's like in The Office when Pam has to tell Michael there's a call on the line for him several times. He needs several attempts to be normal. It's kind of like that. She's like, let's try again.
Relatable.
Anyways, I love Austin. It's a really fun, quirky little town. A really good friend of mine from college, an old roommate of mine, lived down there for a little while. And so I went to visit her, and it was really fun. Very sort of Portland-esque. I lived in Portland for a little while. That's where my son was born. And it's got that same sort of quirky, fun vibe. So
Portland, but hotter.
Yeah, way hotter. Yeah. Yeah.
And we have a great Kidlit community in Austin. I think the Austin SCBWI chapter has 300 members.
Oh, wow. That is big.
Sizable.
Yeah, that is big. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Austin.
And I was reading in your bio from the arc that you had sent us of Animals in Surprising Shades, which sometimes I feel like we'll go 20 minutes without acknowledging the book that, an author is here to talk about. So shout out to that. But in the About the Author section of that, I read that there's a nonprofit that you work for in Austin that I can't recall at the moment, but that you that had a quirky name. Is that right?
It's Austin Batcave, so the acronym is ABC, and it's a literacy nonprofit, not a bat conservancy. It's a literacy nonprofit that teaches creative writing workshops to kids. So I just finished doing a month-long animal poetry camp with an artist. So we did poetry and visual arts once a week with some kids at a local school. And then before that, I led a couple of online poetry camps during the pandemic.
That's wonderful.
That's
come,
really cool.
Yeah, do you come by that education and kids outreach stuff pretty honestly? In terms of your your education,
actually,
you have a background in it?
I would say it's I don't have a background in education, but I would say it's a combination of my love of writing and then also my love of theater and performing.
Which is necessary to keep kids' attention, for sure, and teach them things.
That's awesome. And I was also reading just a little bit, in your bio before we got on. I mean, there is like there's so much. So the PB Writing Spree in 23, shout out to them because we have some friends in that group as well. But also Writing Barn Fellow and Teaching Assistant, and then the Austin SCBWI, the Writing Mentor Award. There's like so much on here. And then also Animals in Surprising Shades, published by Gnome Road. I was really impressed, I was impressed by the list, and then surprised that you are still looking for representation because I mean, wow, like you have, and how many books do you have coming out in the educational market?
So my 16th educational book should hopefully be coming out later this year. And then I also have this trade book as well. And I just sent in an R&R to an editor, and I have another project that's under consideration with an editor.
Oh my gosh.
Hopefully maybe by the end of the year that will change.
So the hustle is let me just and respectable. Yeah.
Yeah. But let me so I want to get into that just a little bit. So are you actively seeking rep, or because I mean, it seems like you're doing just fine. So like, are you kind of just like, whatever, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because it's working?
No, I'm actively seeking representation because I know that there are a lot of houses, and some of them you can submit through SCBWI opportunities, or I'm also part of the Courage to Create, and they have some editor submission opportunities. But some of the houses, you really need to be agented. I have a project that I would love to submit to Imagination Press, which is published by I believe the American Psychological APA, and you need an agent to submit to them. So I'm definitely actively querying. I believe I've sent about 300 queries. So definitely hoping that by the end of the year I get some news there.
Wow. Yeah. And so 300, does that span, is that just for this year, or does that span
that's been since 2017.
Okay.
Pace
Man,
yourself.
the query trenches. Yeah. Wow. They're rough. Cause I mean, your resume like speaks for itself. Like your website is very impressive. So, I guess I highlight it just to say, for people listening, it's so subjective. It's so, it doesn't have anything to do with you personally. Like, you just have to keep working at it because it's just, it'll happen when it happens. But anyways, yeah. Wow.
So, okay, 16 books in the educational market, though. Like, can you talk about how you got to that? Because that's flabbergasting to me. And I know we've talked a little bit with a couple of previous guests. Sam Gassman comes to mind, who had a couple of books in the ed market. But how do you break in there? How do you make those sorts of relationships? And is it? I'll let you talk.
And those are for three different publishers. So the first one I found through 12 by 12. Before Miranda Paul was an agent, she was a member of 12 by 12, and she posted an opportunity with a company called Teacher Created Materials, which you don't actually have to be a teacher to write for them. So I sent them an introductory email with a sample, and then they assigned me a project, and then a year later I did another project for them, and then a little bit after that I found another submission opportunity, I think through a different Facebook group. So that is mainly emailing samples, and they match you with a project. But what I've really enjoyed in that space is I've kind of carved out a niche writing historical fiction work for hire projects. And I was such a fan of the American Girl books when I was younger. So I really love doing those historical fiction projects.
I never
awesome.
thought of those American Girl books as historical fiction, but I suppose they are. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's really fun. The work for hire space seems like, like people get in there and then they sort of have, once you get your foot in the door, you have more opportunities that come about.
Yeah, 11 of those books were for the same series, all about American history. And those were actually high-low books, so high interest but low reading level for teens and maybe older learners who perhaps aren't reading at grade level. So the idea is to give them books that are engaging and not infantilizing. So with teen characters that they can relate to, but at a 3rd or 4th grade reading level, so it's accessible to people with learning disabilities, maybe English language learners, and other people who maybe aren't reading at grade level.
And when you say high-low, not high interest in the sense of like, write about the history of Minecraft or the history of skateboarding or something. It's more like high interest in terms of relatable characters. That's a term. It's a term I haven't.
Yeah, I mean,
heard
in
before.
the nonfiction space, there definitely are high-low books that are like, hey, here's all about Minecraft for teens, written at a 3rd grade reading level. But in this case, it's really characters that are age appropriate, but then the sentence structure and the vocabulary is a little bit simpler.
An interesting niche, I guess, to carve out. Yeah. Huh. Okay. Yeah, that's the first time I think that we've explored this sort of space. So how are you with the writing for hire thing? I mean, but we've talked about folks. I think we've talked to the vast majority of folks that have been on the show where, they want to initiate their own projects and have control over something that they're really passionate about. Do you feel like, and again, here's my weekly tie-in to my day job, where I specifically write for scientists in the farming space, and I don't have a challenge with writing for hire or writing to certain specifications, but that's different for the children's market for most folks.
Well, my background is as a freelance writer, so I'm used to writing to spec and on deadline. So that doesn't bother me. And as I'm sure you both know, and all of our listeners know, traditional publishing can move really slowly. So it is nice to have some of those wins while you're submitting other projects to trade publishers. It's really nice to have those opportunities to write books in other ways. And they can come out more quickly than a trade book. And I haven't done any work for hire books this year, but I have also been working with an ed tech company, writing little sentences, teaching kids different grammar concepts, but also keeping it really high interest and fun. So that's been a great challenge for me as well, and probably not something that most kidlit authors necessarily envision themselves doing, but that can be another study area is working with ed tech companies.
Do you feel like it's hard for you to context switch from one to the other? Because the topic is they're pretty different, right? Like Animals in Surprising Shades, like that is like completely different than writing historical fiction. So is it hard for you to context switch, or is it sort of like for me, I like to have different stuff to switch back and forth to because it helps, like unblock me in certain areas, or if I'm fatigued by something or just, need something else.
My interests are really varied. Like I have a picture book that is set during World War I, so it's historical fiction. And I have some other projects that are funny and punny and not STEM related at all, some SEL projects. So for me, I really like that variety. Mm-hmm. And that also may be something where it's taking a little bit longer for agents to see how I fit in the market, because I do have such a wide range from poetry to SEL and funny and historical and nonfiction and kind of all these. I write in lots of different categories. So for me, it just feels natural to explore lots of different interests and lots of different approaches to writing.
Do you think about your external face in the publishing market? That, like, as you think about Animals in Surprising Shades coming out and your sort of like bulk of educational market materials having any influence on your future career or how you think about like directing what gets published in the future? It's kind of a nebulous question, but.
Yeah, well, I do have another animal poetry collection that is under consideration at a publisher, but it's not really a companion book because the concept is really different. So I think right now, a lot of what I put out on social media is related to Animals in Surprising Shades, obviously, because it just came out and I'm trying to promote that. But I think that my author identity will probably evolve depending on whatever the next project is that gets acquired. And of course, most work for hire authors don't devote as much time to promoting their work for hire books because it's not an advance in royalty structure. But when I get my author copies in the fall, I probably will, shout out those books a little bit. And one of them is also, it's a nonfiction book about deer and antelope. So when I was offered that project, I said, well, that's perfect because I also have this animal poetry collection. So this is sort of adjacent to that. But I'm certainly not limiting myself to writing about animals because I have so many other interests.
You're going to write yourself into an animal corner. That's how you'll be known.
I mean, I have three other picture book projects involving animals in different ways, but there's plenty of other projects too that have nothing to do with animals.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about Animals in Surprising Shades because I have so many questions about it because it was like Josh and I were just chatting briefly before we got on and we both had the same sort of main takeaway. Like it is set, the structure is something that I haven't seen before in terms of the varying ways that you are writing the poetry. Like the poems and the format switch for every single animal, which I thought was really interesting. And I also loved the bottom part where it's not just a sidebar about like the animal or like this is actually true or like fun fact or whatever. It's about the actual poetry, which I thought was very cool because I haven't seen that before. And for me personally, as an adult reading it, I'm like, oh, I never knew that this form existed. That's very cool. And then I went back to sort of examine it and look to see like, oh, right. Okay. It does do that thing with the syllables. Like that's really cool. I didn't notice that before. So can you tell us a little bit about like how you decided to do that? And specifically, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about how you decided which form went with which animal. Because that must have been, I don't know if it was just like, pick one out of a hat and it's fine, or if it was very like methodical. Because it was, it's a very cool format.
So I got an agent R&R on Animals in Surprising Shades back in 2020. And
from Gnome Road?
I was going back and... What's that, Brenna?
From Gnome Road?
No, back when I was submitting it to agents.
Oh, okay.
I had an agent.
Okay, I'm just trying to follow the timeline. Okay, got it.
Oh, no problem. So I originally thought of the concept in late January 2020, wrote it, in the first couple of months of the pandemic, started querying in the summer. And then in the summer, I had an agent R&R, and she said she really liked the pink manta ray poem, which is a shape poem in the shape of a manta ray. But she wanted me to revise some of the other poems so that they delivered that same level of surprise and whimsy. So I kind of went back to the drawing board, and some of the animals that I had originally chosen, I felt like just maybe were not as surprising and as whimsical. So I discarded some of those poems and started over with some different animals. And my mentor, Bethany Hegedus at the Writing Barn, suggested Dictionary for a Better World as a mentor text, which is a poetry collection by Irene Latham and Charles Waters. And so each letter of the alphabet, there's like a different poem related to social justice. And those poems, it mixes different poetic forms. And so that's where the idea of introducing those different poetic forms really took shape. And some of my CPs and a couple of agents really didn't like that approach. They felt like I should use a consistent rhyme scheme and consistent type of poem. However, I had read some other animal books that did that. They followed a consistent rhyme scheme and used the same poetic structure throughout. And some of them do it really well, and others of them, it starts to feel very same after a while. So I really liked the idea of introducing different poetic forms because it's something that elementary school teachers can use in an ELA unit. And it also reflects the biodiversity of our worlds because animals come in different colors, poems come in many different shapes. And so that's another way to explore that theme. In terms of writing the poems, the Pink Manta Ray poem, I always knew was going to be a shaped poem because it's such a fun shape and it really lent itself to that structure. But for a lot of the other poems, I really just tried different things and to see what works. Okay, I'm blocked. I'm trying this out as a haiku. I'm really blocked. So I'm going to try something else until I find something that works for me. And that was really helpful for me as well because I wasn't locked into one rhyme scheme. In fact, not all of the poems rhyme. So I was able to jump around and experiment and find what worked. And I wanted to get an acrostic poem in there. So the closing poem is written as an acrostic.
Can you just break down what an acrostic is for everybody?
So it spells out on the left-hand side, it spells out the word rainbow, but it could spell out any word.
Oh,
and then,
okay, cool.
Yeah. And then because the way the animals are presented, they go in rainbow order so that, and when I do read alouds with kids, I after a couple of poems, I say, okay, we've had the red poison dart frog, we've had the orange newt, what color do you think comes next? And then they yell out yellow.
Oh, okay, very cool. So wow. It is. Wow. I never even, oh my gosh, so much thought and consideration went into this book.
And it's so well engineered too. I mean, the only reason that I know what an acrostic is because my third grader came home and used the term, and I went, "What? What did you just say?" And she's
Right.
she's schooling me, so I know that this is directly relevant to that age group. But I mean, just an observation to how the book is formatted. Like I think of young poetry collections, and that sameness is, I think, really nice for predictability for things like my younger kid who's 6 years old, or from between 3 to 6. I think there would be a level of comfort that they would take from having something that's like a predictable rhythm versus that variety that becomes so teachable. And the teachable thing, I think, is interesting to explore from the perspective of, you're not teaching what iambic pentameter is. You're not teaching, meter and rhythm. That's for the teachers to explore. This is almost like not historical fiction, but it's like it's teaching about the forms themselves and leaving space to explore the animals as well, outside the confines of the book, which I think is interesting.
And my editor at Gnome Road is the one who came up with the poetic seek and find in the back matter, which I thought was just so clever. And some of those poems are poems that I had written originally in my first version that I started submitting, and then I replaced them with other animals, but they found a home in the back matter.
Oh, that's always nice as a writer too, I feel like, because you put so much time and effort into, sort of engineering these poems to fit the animals and all the stuff. And then in the end, it doesn't fit. And you're just like, shoot, I really want it to, but it doesn't. So to find a home for it, somewhere else in the book even is just, that's really nice. And sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I wrote multiple poems about poison dart frogs, and one didn't fit in the book, so I submitted it to an online children's poetry magazine called The Dirigible Balloon, and so now it's published on there. Yeah,
I love being able to find a home for stuff that doesn't seem to fit anywhere else. I did the same thing with Dirigible. I have one that didn't fit for anything else, and I was like, oh, maybe they would like it. And they were like, yeah, totally, we'll publish this. I was like, yay, because it's so nice to just have your stuff out in the world somewhere instead of just in your sad, Google Drive, because nobody will ever see it. I wanted to circle back real quick about the thing that you said about your critique partners and how some of them were like, we don't like the structure, it doesn't really work, it needs to be consistent. Just because, I really like what you said about, sort of doing your work and reading, several different kinds, several examples of either consistency or mixing it up. And you ultimately in your gut were like, no, I want it to be not consistent. I want it to be, different across the board. Because, we talk about this on the podcast and just in writing circles in general, how much feedback do you take in? What do you take and what do you leave? And ultimately, it comes back to you and your story and what exactly are you trying to do? So I just wanted to point that out because I appreciate that you were like, look, I thank you for the feedback, but like, I'm not going to do that. So, how hard was that for you to do? Did you waffle about that at all? Or were you just like, I don't agree with that?
I mean, I thought about making it consistent, but I just felt that the variety also played into the theme of biodiversity, which is like a key sort of takeaway from the book. Mm-hmm. So, and I also felt like I would be better able to execute if I'm not constrained to one rhyme scheme or one format. So I felt like I had multiple reasons for deciding to stick with this direction. And obviously my editor really liked this version. So I think that also validates that decision.
Yeah. What in the initial version where you're backing the Pink Manta Ray concrete poem, what forms did the other like initial draft poems take? Were they still as diverse as they are now?
They weren't. I didn't have those sidebars of like, here's a haiku. It was sort of I was kind of tiptoeing into that poetic variety, but I hadn't fully committed to it. And I think once I read Dictionary for a Better World, it inspired me to really, really go in that direction and really embrace different poetic forms.
How did you feel about the R&R not moving forward? In terms of,
it was disappointing. Yeah, it was disappointing, but my critique partners, I think even though one or two who said, I think you should use the same format throughout, they all said, this has to be a book. And so I decided that by the end of, because I had gotten the R&R, I had gotten a lot of agents who had very, very strong positive reactions to the manuscript. And so my critique partners were saying, this really should be a book. This is that good. And so I decided that if I wasn't agented by the end of 2020, then I would start submitting to editors on my own. And of course, on December 30th of 2020, I had another agent request more manuscripts. So then that delayed things a little bit because I wanted to wait and see if that agent was going to offer representation. But then March came around and Gnome Road had this open submission window and they were interested in STEM poetry and nature. So I just decided perfect. I can't wait any longer. I need to get this. This is, a very specific, I think the submission window was maybe a month or two. And I was like, I've got to take my shot and get this out there. And I'm glad that I did because pretty quickly after I submitted it, the editor asked for a Zoom meeting and then she made an offer. Oh,
that's wonderful. You weren't still waiting for that December 30th agent to get back to you, were you? I would have mentally and emotionally given up. I think I nudged
her when I got the offer. And then she actually sent a very long love letter of like, here's what I love about your PB bio, and here's what I love about this other project. But that's typically the responses that I get. Man. But I'm just not sure. My client list is so full. So I just decided to go ahead and sign the contract on my own. And I did have a lawyer friend look it over at least.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so hard though, to have an agent, sort of like gush over your work and your bio and everything, and then ultimately to be like, sorry, because it's kind of like, what else do you need? Like, what, exactly. what is it? I mean, that's how I would feel. Like, oh my God, like, please just tell me, like, what is it that you are looking for? Because I mean, that's like, it's such a mixed message, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of agents it liked the poetry, but they weren't sure about selling it because children's poetry is, a smaller market. And I've definitely found that there are some booksellers who are a little bit wary of children's poetry, which is why I'm now focusing more on schools and libraries in my marketing. But yeah, I'm glad that I gave myself permission to go ahead and submit it to some editors instead of, waiting for representation.
Was the marketing component, and sorry, I think I've got a delay. So if I'm talking over you, sorry. We'll cut this part out.
No, it's fine. It's cool. Yeah, go ahead.
Was the marketing component part of the initial Zoom conversation? Here's how we're going to place this. Here's the vision that we have for this book. Or did that come later?
No, I think my editor, Sandra, did mention in the initial Zoom conversation, she said, I see so many authors doing giveaways on social media. And she said a lot of times those books, just go to other authors. And so she said, I think it's really important if you do giveaways, I think it's really important to try to target the school and library market rather than just marketing to other authors. So when my book launched, I did a giveaway of a copy of my book and a 30-minute Zoom school visit. And I think I had probably over 100 teachers and librarians enter that giveaway. And it ended up going to a school librarian in Virginia. So I sent her the book, and then we had a lovely school visit on Zoom, and she gave me a testimonial for my website. So I think it was really smart of Sandra, my editor, to kind of say that up front, that all these authors are doing giveaways, but you don't want to just be talking to other authors.
Yeah, that's definitely a consideration. Yeah, because you want it to get into the bigger markets and to go beyond the choir, so to speak. Because we all love everybody else's stuff, and we're here to support. But yeah, in terms of getting it to a wider space, that's really good advice.
It's much easier for librarians and teachers who fall in love to use the libraries or the school's money to make more purchases of your books to get it in other hands. So make note, authors who have teachable books, for sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add, and Gnome Road is a smaller publisher. They are a CBWI PAL publisher, and they did invest a lot of energy into a teacher guide. There's a lot of resources on teachingbooks.net related to my book, and there's a really detailed educator resource guide. And some of my friends in PB Spree at bigger publishers have had to pay for that themselves. So I really appreciated that Gnome Road saw the value of those teacher resources, and they've invested in that.
Is that a standard for Gnome Road? I think of them as being generally more STEMmy.
A lot of their books are STEMmy. I don't know for sure, but I think they have done teacher guides. I think they've done teacher guides for all of their books, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. Is that something that you particularly chased after and worked on, given your sort of background writing to spec and writing freelance and things, or is that something that they generally will contract out?
Oh, I didn't write it. They contracted it out. Now I had done an activity with my niece. We painted some rocks to look like Picasso bugs, which is one of the animals in my book. And then I turned that into a little Instagram reel showing other homeschool families and teachers how they could incorporate a STEM craft into their curriculum. And the educator resource guide includes a link to that demonstration video. But most of the material she contracted out to people who specialize in curriculum guides and teacher guides. And actually, I'm doing an outdoor event in Austin next week in the park. It's a little mini nature poetry workshop. And I realized I have all these handouts and I needed something to weigh them down. So I'm using the Picasso bug rocks that we painted several months ago. I'm going to use those as paperweights
nice product
for
placement.
all my handouts so they don't blow away.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, I'm glad I kept the rocks, because afterwards I was like, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with these, but I kept them around in my garage just in case.
It's time for this week's book reviews. from Jon. Jon's review this week is Don't Call Me Grumpycorn by Sarah McIntyre, a fabulously colorful space adventure with Unicorn and his friends, Mermaid, Narwhal, and Jellyfish, that focuses on themes of kindness, inclusivity, and appreciation. And if there's anything to take away from this awesome space tale, it's that sometimes the fabulous things we are all searching for aren't really as fabulous as we thought, and the true fabulousness that we should have been looking for ends up being what we already have, which is super fabulous. Jon gives this story 5 fabulous planets out of 5. That was a tongue twister, but also fabulous. From Josh. Josh's review starts at the library. He loves it when he sees a friend's book on display, and lo and behold, Kim-Hoa Ung's A Gift for Nene was front and center, until he checked it out, of course. It's a super sweet story that mixes familial relationships with being thoughtful and crafty, like many of the best adult-child family stories. It's easy to imagine, but only lightly implied, that Nene might have known what the scheme was from the get-go. And even if that's the case, it's comforting and welcoming to have a central story led entirely from the child's actions, with the adults in the story gamely following along. A gift for Nene is a gift for us. And my review for this week is Tenacious, 15 Adventures Alongside Disabled Athletes by Patty Cisneros Prevo and illustrated by Dion, MBD. This compilation is incredible stories, has it all. Rhyming couplets for the younger crowd, motivational stories from Annabelle Gibb, a disabled hip-hop dancer, to Sandy Duquette, who set the world record in marathon running for above-the-knee amputations, and true-to-life illustrations that pull the reader in from page 1. Every story is different, but the same theme comes up again and again: tenacity. Don't forget to get your own library reviews and requests in. It's the #1 way to help an author's sales. Love the podcast and want to help support more great episodes like this one? Well, the Verse Show is now on Patreon, and big thanks to our first Patreon subscriber, Jenna Johnston. We couldn't be more excited for your support and for listening to the podcast. Thank you so much. But if the Patreon's not your style, we totally get that. Community shoutouts are here to stay. You could shout out someone amazing in the Kidlit world, check out the merch, leave us a review, or even just share the episode with a friend. A big thank you to everyone out there listening. And now, back to our show. Can we circle back real quick to what you said about Gnome Road? So they are a PAL SCBWI publisher. Can you just break that down, what that means for listeners?
Yes. So SCBWI has a designation called PAL, which is published and listed, and it's certain standards that publishers need to meet in order to be considered a PAL publisher. I believe they need to have at least 4 books published, and there's some other criteria that they need to meet. And so if you're an SCBWI member and you're published by a PAL publisher, then you are considered a PAL member, and it's just sort of a level up from general membership. Now, I actually had written for, it used to be called Boys Life, and now it's called Scout Life. It's the magazine of the Boy Scouts of America. And they are also a PAL publisher. You can get your PAL membership through books and also through writing for children's magazines. So I believe when I first joined SCBWI back in 2016, 2017, I was already a PAL member because of my writing for magazines. And now I'm a PAL member also because of the books that I've written. And you can receive PAL membership also for work for hire books, as long as the publisher is on that list.
So is it generally, oh, sorry, Josh. Is it generally smaller?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it generally smaller publishers who are on that list? Like, because you said at least 4 books published. So I'm guessing like it's publishers who are sort of growing their...
No, the big publishers are on there too.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's just like, it's minimum. And then like publishers that surpass that are also considered PAL publishers.
Okay. So generally, if you have a traditionally published book, you may be a PAL author, and then you are eligible for this other membership through SCBWI.
And then the Austin chapter is very large. And so they often send out emails specifically to PAL members. For instance, they'll say, hi, PAL members, we have an opportunity for you to sign books at the Texas Library Association conference, or, we have an opportunity for you to apply for this or that thing. And that doesn't go out to the general membership because those members, are not published yet. And so those opportunities wouldn't be applicable to them.
Okay, got it.
So this is just to be clear on this, because this is an education for me. This is like a sub certification. Like, you call yourself a PAL author because you have been published by a PAL publisher, and that affords you some level of like additional opportunity or additional connection. Just, I guess, making the observation for those listening to this, that if this is not a program that you're aware of, and maybe I'm only not aware of it because I'm not a published author, but if you're not aware of it, I guess check your publisher, because you may be able to call yourself a PAL author. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
And I put that, a lot of agents like to see your SCBWI, affiliation in the query, because it shows that you're invested in working on your craft. So I say in my queries, I'm an SCBWI PAL member, I'm a Writing Barn Fellow, and that just shows what I'm doing to work on building my craft.
And you certainly have racked up plenty of bona fides to lengthen your query letters.
So I wanted to circle back a little bit to what you were talking about when you were submitting, and whether or not to submit to an editor, and if you're gonna hold off for the agent. So I am also in the query trenches, and I feel like it's become a bit of a sort of strategy kind of thing, because if you submit to an editor and you do get an offer or interest or whatever, then you can, you have something to sort of leverage or nudge, agents who might also have that manuscript. But it's almost like it's something to consider, but the timeline is sort of out of your hands. So it's like, okay, if I sub this thing here and this thing here, but then it's silent on the agent's end, but I get interest, I can nudge them. But, do you, has it been read? Do you, you know what I mean? I feel like it's a little bit nebulous. You sort of don't know which one to sub to first, a little bit like chicken and the egg kind of thing. So did you think about that at all? What is your strategy?
Well, I think, and I would say that you could nudge, even if you got interested in a different project. I think you could nudge the agent that has your manuscript and say, hey, I have interest in this other project, because it shows that you're not just focused on one manuscript, because they want to represent your full body of work. Now, when I got that offer from Gnome Road, they were brand new. So I did use that to nudge some agents, but that it didn't really mean anything to them at the time. I know now Gnome Road gets tons of agented submissions, so I think it would mean something different now, 2 years later, than it did versus 2021. I think my strategy has always been to submit projects to agents first, and then if I'm not getting traction, then to shift to editor submissions, because you'll have more options if you go through an agent. Mm-hmm. But if you really believe in a project and for whatever reason it hasn't found its agent home, submitting to editors is another way to get it out into the world. But I do think it's preferable to have an agent, because you have more options, and then you also have someone negotiating the contract on your behalf. I think poetry was a little different because, it tends to be published by smaller presses, although the bigger presses do sometimes publish children's poetry too. And so, I just felt like the agents are validating the quality. They just weren't sure of the viability in the market. Some of them said, I just sold another STEM poetry book. I just don't know that I can do it. I don't know if I can send out another one, so soon. And so I felt like in this case, because I had sent it probably about 50 agents, and gotten a lot of very positive responses, but no offers of representation. And so I felt like, okay, now's the time to try a different approach. I don't think I've sent any projects directly to an editor without, actually, no, that's not true, because I have this other animal poetry project. I've sent it to a very few agents, but my experience the last time was that there wasn't a huge appetite from agents for poetry. So I did send, I pitched the poetry collection to an editor through a conference, and then she asked to see it. And then my editor at Gnome Road, because I've already published poetry with her, I also sent it to her as she's looking at her list for the future. But my other, like my fiction and nonfiction picture books that are a little more traditional in structure, I've been submitting them to agents first and then sending them out to editors once I've kind of tested the waters with agents first.
Mm. And now that you have an... Oh. I'll let you go, Josh. Go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna ask what your threshold is for floating it to agents and gauging whether it's time to just take it on your own. I want to couple that question with what projects you query at all, because there must be a few things that you just hold that maybe you don't think are queryable, or maybe are like a backdoor. Here's what I'm trying to investigate is this notion that I have about my own work that like some of my stuff may be too off the wall for me to lead with it in a conversation with an agent or an editor. It may be like a good second or third book, but I may need to lead with something that's like more representative of something that would not, it's not to say that my work is shocking, but would not be so weird as to be rejected on the merits of its weirdness and potential as like a debut publication.
Yeah, I have a board book project. It's 2 companion board books, both about music. And as I'm sure most people know, the board book market is even smaller than picture books because they're more expensive to produce. And so I've submitted those to a couple of publishers and gotten champagne passes from some of those publishers. I definitely don't tend to query those to agents because agents are not I don't think that that's necessarily the first thing they want to see from an author is a board book, because they know how hard it will be to sell. I have, when an agent asks to see additional work, I have included those board books sometimes within my body of work, so they can see, she has a number of full-length picture books. She also has these board book projects, and so I'm writing for a variety of ages, which I've heard is something that agents like to see.
I would think diversity is a strength, more so than a specific writing thesis. And selling to different markets and in different areas allows a much larger throughput of your work than if you were just to sell, one well-defined Susan book after another, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And I'm also, right now I'm reading Kim Norman's really, really detailed guide to school visits. She has a how-to book on Amazon all about setting up your author school visit program. And one of the things that she mentions is that schools love it when authors have different books for different age groups, so they can bring in one author and he or she can adapt the program for different grade levels over the course of the day.
Yeah, I feel like that's an important consideration just in picture books in general. Like if you have enough hooks in there to appeal to, elementary school kids, but then like upper elementary school, or even, like those older readers who are reading like the sidebars, or you've got, back matter in there that can be expanded on for, whatever classroom. It's like, yeah, however many hooks you can like, squeeze in or like layer over is gonna really help. I was gonna ask about, now that you do have a relationship with Sandra at Gnome Road, do you tend to just, email her directly, or are you still going through like their official like query form, or like how they do it?
Oh, I think all the Gnome Road authors just email her directly when they want to discuss a project. And interestingly, I have several other editors at other publishers who have said to me, I want to see more work, so don't use the query email, don't use the submissions email, just email me directly. So I do that with several editors now.
That's really nice.
What do we call like one level above a champagne pass? That's like, no, I don't. I don't have a place.
A
I don't
Susan
have a place
pass.
for this.
You call that a Susan pass, Josh.
I'm going to give you a Susan. I don't have a place for this, but I love the vibe. Like, give me more of these vibes. That's a great way to pass on work, for sure.
Right? It can't be, I feel like that's probably really nice and really frustrating to hear at the same time, right? Because it's like, you can't get any closer. It's like, we love this so much, but you're like, really? Like,
And I had an editor pass on a project, and then she suggested some other publishing houses that might be interested in it. And of course, a lot of those are not open to unagented submissions. But she did ask to see more work, and I have an R&R with that editor. So hopefully this project that she's looking at, hopefully that will be a better fit for her.
So you've sort of mentioned this a couple times with, you can't, like, some publishers, you need to have an agent in order to submit. So I just want to throw this out there because I was talking to a guest that we're going to have on in a little bit. He's an author, and the way that he got his agent was actually, he submitted some stuff to Scholastic, did he submit it? I can't remember, but ultimately it was like, we want to see your work, but you need to submit it through an agented channel. Like, we can't really consider it without an agent. And he was like, okay, shoot. And he really wanted to go with Aaron Murphy Lit, they are generally closed unless you have a referral or you see somebody speak at a conference, right? So you can't just cold query. Right. So what he did was he emailed them and was like, look, I totally understand your policy. I know you guys are usually closed. However, he's like, under the circumstances, like, Scholastic really wants to see my stuff. Would you consider just taking a look at it? Because I need somebody to submit, on my behalf. And they actually wrote back and were like, yeah, totally. Like, we'd love to see it. Like, let's do that. So I'm just throwing it out there in case, you could use that in a way that is helpful, in your own querying, to just be like, hey, I've had interest from so-and-so, or, I think this editor would really like my stuff, but I can't submit without an agent. So, like, could you just look at it and, like, let's see what we can do. Because I feel like I've been in situations semi-recently with my own querying, and I'm like, man, there are so many rules and so many guidelines and so many, like, you cannot do this and please don't do that and don't send me this thing and don't, like, query multiple agents at the same house. And, like, some of those I totally get, like, those are reasonable and I can follow those. But some of them I feel like are just so arbitrary, and you're just like, come on, like, can I please just send you this thing? Like, so I just, at some point, I guess my point is, like, you got to just, like, roll the dice and take a chance and see what happens. Cause, like, we've had a bunch of people on the podcast talking about how they got their agent, and some of them have been super unconventional. Like, Joyce Sweeney was on and was like, I gave this, I sent this champagne pass. I loved her stuff. And, you're not supposed to respond to passes, but this client of hers did. And just to say thank you so much. And Joyce ended up signing her. So, like,
oh, wow.
You never know. That was a really long tangent. I get excited for, like, I don't know, like, being able to, like, thread the needle a little, or, like, find that loophole and just, like, figure out, where you fit in. Cause, like, I don't know, like, it's really hard. So if you have a shot, go for it, take it. Cause what's the worst that can happen? You're in the same situation as you started,
Yeah.
I've definitely, agents who've said, keep me in mind for the future, I've definitely sent them stuff when they're closed. Cause thinking they said, send me stuff in the future, it was a little unclear if that meant, like, while I'm closed or wait until I'm open. And usually if they're closed, they say, I'm closed right now. Wait until I reopen. But I figured it couldn't hurt to try.
Yes. And not to say, right. And not to say, not to adhere to, guidelines or show respect to people in the publishing industry. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying, yeah, if you have a shot and you can, do something about it, like, for people listening, just, you gotta go for it, because otherwise it may never happen.
I think that was a little bit of a gray area, because they did, ask to see more work, but it's unclear. Are you close to everyone? Are you close just to cold queries?
Yeah.
I think it's a gray area.
Totally.
Or is this like is it a soft rejection where it's like, oh yeah, I'd love to see your stuff sometime, but that's not actually true. I don't think that was the case. What I find
could be.
Yeah, what I find interesting though is creating the space for those sorts of unconventional exposures to take place, because traditionally they happen in conventions or in, meetings through SEBWI or, whatever the case is, where there's a paid component to your presence at this place, where you're going to have a face-to-face opportunity. And those opportunities are increasing, but there's still it's tough because they are pay limited. They require you to be there. They require you to invest part of yourself and your own money in something that's ultimately uncertain. And you obviously get a lot more out of these presences and these opportunities than just the opportunity to query. But it's a tough situation to be in.
Yeah. Well, so Susan, do you have books coming out that you want to promote before we let you go, or is there anything we haven't talked about, or you want to tell us where to find you?
Oh, sure. Well, I think I had told Josh that my book was inspired by the Malabar giant squirrels. So
awesome.
I thought I might share that story. And
yes, please.
Awesome.
It's definitely one that I've discovered as I've been doing author appearances. I've discovered that kids have a lot of interest in hearing about the squirrels. So that's something that I usually share when I interact with kids. And I have these photos laminated of the Malabar giant squirrels.
Awesome.
That is an unconventional looking squirrel.
Right? Yeah. So this is there are no squirrels in the book, but this is what sparked my interest in the topic. And I did an event a couple of months ago in Austin called Squirrel Fest. So I got these photos printed and laminated for Squirrel Fest, and now I can bring them on author visits or story times or wherever I'm doing a reading or an appearance.
Amazing.
But I read about these squirrels online back in 2020. And I was so fascinated by their bright colors. There's like purples and golds and navy blues. And so it got me curious about, could I write a concept book about animals in unusual colors that we wouldn't expect? And then I started thinking, okay, if I were Jane Yolen, I would write this as a poetry collection. And then I said, well, I've been writing poetry for most of my life, so maybe I should give it a shot. And that was the genesis for the book. And I did write a poem about the Malabar giant squirrels who live in India. And I just didn't feel like that poem was as strong as some of the other ones. So it didn't make it into the final manuscript. But that's what was the little spark of inspiration for me to explore this topic.
Do you have the poem? Will you read it for us?
Let me see. I probably do.
I would love to hear this. Because I've never heard of that squirrel before.
Yeah, and I don't associate, maybe this is my lack of worldly sort of education, but I don't associate squirrels with India necessarily. So
yeah.
They certainly don't look like American squirrels.
They really don't. And they are these colors because it helps them to camouflage to the brighter colors that are the plants in southern India. All right, so I pulled up the poem.
Oh, awesome.
It says, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, step right up to see the amazing Malabar squirrels. Watch closely as they scurry and glide on a tightrope of branches. And I think there was actually, I revised that. Let me see if there's another version. I have a newer version of that poem.
The poetry form that you used in that one is Big Top. The one that presents a concept like a circus. Not fully formed, right. In terms of a poetry format yet. And this is a more recent version of that poem. High among the Malabar trees, with branches instead of a flying trapeze, they scurry and glide with the greatest of ease.
Oh, I like that one. That's really fun.
Yeah.
And what poetry form was that in?
At that time, I wasn't really fully invested in that idea of exploring different.
It's a Susan.
Different poetry formats.
Yeah, it's a Susan. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. That was really fun.
Thank you.
And where can we find you? Because you are not on Twitter, is that right?
No, I am.
You are.
I'm
That's
Urban
how we got
News
connected
writer
for sure.
on Twitter.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. I was searching for your name earlier and I couldn't find you on Twitter, but it's because it's not your name. Okay, so I got to go back and find you.
Yeah, I slid into Josh's DMs. That's how we originally connected.
Okay, got it.
And I'm also Urban Muse Writer on Instagram. And my website is staylorwrites.com.
Okay, we will link all of that in the show notes so that people can find you. Because sometimes my Twitter just does not bring stuff up, and then I have to open like a second page and do like a weird search. And anyways, I didn't. Okay, so we will put it out there so people can find you, and it'll be super easy.
Your threads is the same as your Instagram too, right? We're just banking on threads existing into the future.
I have not joined Threads just yet.
When this airs in November or whenever that happens, we'll edit it so that you say you have joined Threads because it'll be the thing by then.
Yeah, probably by then I will have.
So many social media apps, just so little time. Okay, well, indeed. I mean, Susan, thank you for coming on. This has been really informative. I feel like there was a bunch of stuff in your chat that I generally didn't know about Kidlit, like Pal and just some of the other, like the poetry forms. And it was really informational, and I appreciate you chatting with us.
Thanks, Brenna. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening this week.
Find all of our episodes and other associated links and information at linktree.com/verseshow.
Or reach out to us on Bluesky, Instagram, or Threads. Thanks again, and we'll see you next verse.
Bye.